Well, good morning and welcome to Lake Oconee Church Online. My name is Rob. I'm on staff and we've got a great service planned for you this morning. Even though we can't all be in the same room together, there's a few things that you can do to engage. First, join the chat. Just pick a name, say hi to everyone, and feel free to comment on a song lyric or a thought that sticks out to you. If something's weighing on you, click the request prayer button and our team will be happy to come alongside you in praying for that. And if this is your first time tuning in, click the I'm a Guest button to help stay connected, and we'll send you a code for a free Redbox rental as our way of saying thank you for spending part of your Sunday morning with us. Well, over the next hour or so, we'll spend some time singing a few songs with Mel, Amy, and the band. We'll hear a helpful message from our lead pastor, Annie McQuaid, and stick around to the end to hear some thoughts from an educator on the current homeschool situation. Well, that's everything that you need to know for this morning, so let's get started.
The night is falling and fear is coming, still you're calling me. When faith is lost and hope exhausted, you will be my strength. When my mind says I'm not good enough, God, you're enough for me, yeah. I've decided I'm not giving up. You won't give up on me. You won't give up on me. Your love is holding on, it won't let go. Feel it breaking out, I can let go. Your love is holding on, it won't let go. Feel it breaking out, like an echo, echo in my soul. Every season you keep repeating promises to me. There's no stopping when you have started till it is complete. When my mind says I'm not good enough, God, you're enough for me. Yeah. I've decided I'm not giving up. You won't give up on me. You won't give up on me. Love is falling on, it won't let go. Feel it breaking out, I can let go. Love is falling on, it won't let go. Feel it breaking out, I can let go. Echo in my soul. My mind says I'm not good enough. God, you're enough for me. Yeah. I decided I'm not giving up. 'Cause you won't give up on me. You won't give up on me. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo. Your love is holding on, it won't let go. I feel it breaking out, yeah. Your love is holding on, it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo. Your love is holding on, it won't let go. No. I feel it breaking out like an echo, echo in my soul.
My grandma was an amazing, amazing woman. She was just extraordinary to me as a kid. My grandma Mac, I never heard her raise her voice. I never once saw her behave out of the ordinary. She somehow knew exactly how to act in absolutely every situation. And she dressed incredibly tastefully. Even when it was early morning and she was in the kitchen fixing her boiled egg and her coffee, and she was just dressed impeccably every single time that I saw her. But I learned as I got a little bit older that my grandmother was scrappy. She grew up during the Great Depression, and she got married shortly after that. And though their grocery store was pretty far away from their house, rather than riding the bus, she would take that bus fare and she would set it aside and save that money. And that decision very early on allowed her to position she and my grandfather in a really wise place going forward as they came out of that Depression era. And the Great Depression was certainly a time that was disruptive for everybody that lived through it. But it wasn't the only disruptive time that humankind has walked through. Think about the health situations that humans have walked through over centuries, just back a few centuries. The bubonic plague in the middle of the 1300s was certainly a disrupting time, and many were killed because of that illness. Smallpox in the early 1500s, and the Spanish flu in the beginning of the 1900s. And that's just a few of the circumstances that infected people and affected people. But it wasn't just health situations. There were the wars that our country has been involved in over its lifespan. And in each one of those wars, families have been disrupted, lives have been disrupted. It has an effect. And it's not just the health or the wars. There are things that you can probably think back to, things that have happened in your lifetime that you would say that was a disrupting period of time. For me, I think back to 9/11. That was a disrupting period of time. Things didn't just drift back to the way they were beforehand. Maybe for you, it's 2008 and the Great Recession and everything that happened, maybe to you, maybe to your business, maybe to your finances in 2008. And as we look at a list of things that play out in our lives from all different directions and across generations, we walk away knowing for sure, even in a time that we're trying to make our way through COVID, we walk away knowing that this is not the only disruption that you will experience. It's not the only disruption that you're ever going to experience. It's not the only time that things are going to be out of your control. There will be another wave, maybe not of this, but a wave of something that hits your life that disrupts you from the norm that you prefer. And maybe that will land personally. Maybe it will land professionally. Maybe it will hit your finances or your health, or maybe it's going to hit you relationally. But without a doubt, we know for sure that there will be more disruption because we won't be in control for everything. So we have to ask the question, what do we do to prepare for another disrupting wave? What do we do when things are out of our control? How do we prepare for when they're out of control next? Do we simply go through our lives hoping that it doesn't hit us and that it hits everybody else? Do we live in fear, staring at the ceiling at night, just sitting back going, what if it's tomorrow? What if it's this? What if it's that? What if I didn't do enough? Or maybe for you, you tend to self-medicate that fear, to drown it out in some sort of pleasure that you pursue. Or maybe we treat it by overreacting. We oversave, or we overspend, or we overcelebrate. We live for the weekend because that's when we can drown it all out and pretend like real life isn't existing. Or maybe we simply go through life beaten down and discouraged and depressed because we're convinced that around the next corner is going to be something out of our control, something that disrupts what we prefer. And we struggle through every step of our lives. Well, thankfully, one of Jesus' closest followers, Peter, he spent some time with a group of people who were working their way through a regular, ongoing disruption in their lives. And as he spent time with them, he gave them some help and some hope for how they should deal with their disruption. And so we're going to take a look at what he had to say right after we sing this next song.
You've overcome this world with love and made my fight your own. I lift my eyes, throw fear aside, and sing out into the night. 'Cause even when the world caves, even when the fight calls, even when the war's waged, I'll take heart. 'Cause I know you are greater, forever you're a savior. I will sing your praise with all that I have, with all that I am, Lord. I stare down the ways that you own the tide. I still my soul and know that you wait for me. All waters wild, where faith walks above the storm. 'Cause even when the world caves, even when the fight calls, even when the war's waged, I'll take heart. I know you're greater, forever you're a savior. I will sing your praise with all that I have, with all that I am, Lord. With all that I have, with all that I am, Lord. And I won't let the storm weather my heart, won't let the darkness beat me down. Sing in the night, my hope alive in you. And I'll walk through the fire and not be burned, pray in the fight and watch you turn. Jesus, today I give it all to you. No, I won't let the storm weather my heart, won't let the darkness beat me down. Sing in the night, my hope alive in you. Yes, and I'll walk through the fire and not be burned, pray in the fight and watch you turn. Jesus, today I give it all to you. 'Cause even when the world caves, even when the fight comes, even when the war is waged, I'll take heart. 'Cause I know you are greater, forever you're a savior. I will sing your praise with all that I have, with all that I am, Lord. With all that I have, with all that I am, I won't let the storm weather my heart, won't let the darkness beat me down. Sing in the night, my hope alive in you. And I'll walk through the fire and not be burned, pray in the fight and watch you turn. Jesus, today I give it all to you. No, I won't let the storm weather my heart, won't let the darkness beat me down. Sing in the night, my hope alive in you. And I'll walk through the fire and not be burned, pray in the fight and watch you turn. Jesus, today I give it all to you. I give it all to you.
It was AD 64, and Rome was on fire. It was on fire, some speculate, because Nero, the emperor at the time, had lit it on fire because his intention was to rebuild the city of Rome in the way that he wanted it built. But regardless of whether that was true, Nero redirected the attention on the Jesus followers of that day. And he said that they were to blame for the fire that had engulfed Rome. And so he took those Christians and he took them captive and he began to torture them and execute them in excruciating ways that brought entertainment to the people of Rome as they watched them suffer and die. And it was during that time that Peter writes to this group of Jesus followers. And he says, look, I get that you are living through a disruption. For some of you, you fear for your very lives. For others of you, you've lost people that you love. And for still others of you, you've lost your homes and your business and everything else because you are now scattered around trying to figure out a way to escape Nero's clutches. And as he writes to them, he says, I get it. You're in a time of disruption now. It's out of control now, but there is still hope. He writes it like this, and he says, in keeping with his promises, God's promises, we are looking forward to a new heaven and a new earth where righteousness dwells. And here's what Peter knew. Peter knew that the world had been infected by sin. Though it had been created perfect, it was infected by sin. And that infection brought death and disruption. It brought brokenness. It brought deterioration and heartache. All of that was the result of sin. But sin and everything that it ruined would one day be done away with. And the earth would once again be restored to the perfection and peace and wholeness and health that God created it with to begin with. But as you well know, destruction comes before renovation. And if you ever watched a show on HGTV, you know that demo day comes way before the big reveal. So Peter said it this way. He says, but the day of the Lord will come like a thief. The heavens will disappear with a roar. The elements will be destroyed by fire, and the earth and everything done in it will be laid bare. And that day will bring about the destructions of the heavens by fire, and the elements will melt in the heat. This day of the Lord that will surprise everyone, it will come like a thief. It was something that Jesus had talked about. And so it makes sense then that Peter, one of Jesus' closest followers, and John, also a close friend of Jesus, that they would talk about it as well. But many of these followers had been Jewish in their practice before they began to follow Jesus. And they were familiar with Isaiah, a prophet who had also talked about this coming day of the Lord. A day when God, in his righteousness, resets the world. Much like you would your internet connection. You reset your modem. God resets the world. So we ask, well, when will that happen? And how will that happen? And we're looking for a ton of explanation that Peter doesn't provide, because that's not Peter's point. Peter's point is you are living in a time where you are out of control. You are living in a time of disruption. And he asks a question that then echoes throughout time. Here's what it says. Since everything will be destroyed in this way, what kind of people ought you to be? If we were to rephrase that in Peter-ish, here's what it would look like. Since all this is temporary and out of your control anyway, who do you want to be really? Since all this is temporary and out of your control anyway, who do you want to be really? For some of us, we get tripped up on that very first phrase. All this is temporary. We kind of like our lives. We enjoy what we've created around us. We've got things we're looking forward to. And so for us, the idea that this is temporary, that just causes us to get a little bit frazzled. And yet, as we walk through a pandemic, it reminds us that every single one of us are vulnerable. And it causes us to ask, what am I doing that will outlast me? Where am I investing my time and my energy and my expertise and my relationships? Where am I investing that in someone or something that is going to live far beyond me? As we ask that question, it helps us to move past the idea that all of this is temporary. There's more to this life than this life. Since all this is temporary and out of control anyway, for many of us, that's where we struggle. The idea that it's out of our control. We truly believe that we are in control of so much that happens in our lives, and we are shocked every single time that it is out of our control. Because we think of how much energy and effort we've put into keeping it within our control. And so we begin to manipulate the people and things around us in order to get it back in our control. Because for us, it's so difficult to accept that it's out of our control anyway. And so we're stunned as things don't play out like we thought they would. We're shocked every single time that we're disappointed by people and circumstances and things that didn't play out the way we would have scripted them. Since all this is temporary and out of control anyway, who do you want to be really? For many of us, I would guess we've never stopped to ask that question. We've never stopped to decide, who do I want to be really? In light of the fact that it's all out of control, in light of the fact that it's all temporary, who do I really, truly want to be? Well, Peter has a suggestion as he writes to these believers at this time. And he says, since everything will be destroyed in this way, what kind of people ought you to be? You ought to live holy and godly lives. Holy and godly, those sound a whole lot like church words that we never use in any other context, but words that perhaps should be descriptive of our lives. When we start to use words like holy and godly, we start to think of the little angel on your shoulder with a halo, and then on the other side there's a couple of horns on that one, and there's this battle going on. But the idea of being holy, the original Greek word, there simply means to be set apart. The other day I was working on my laptop and I was arranging some of the files that were on my desktop. It had gotten pretty cluttered. And so as I was working through those different files, there were some that as I got to them, I realized they should have been thrown away a long time ago. So they went into the trash. And then there were others that needed to be moved into a different folder. And then there was a select group of just a few files that had some special data in them that I needed to work on. And those moved into a completely different folder than all the rest. They were set apart on my computer. Well, what Peter is saying is that we, as Jesus followers, need to be set apart. And we're set apart not because we're weird, and not because we're churchgoers, or not because we fall under some broad Christian category that we decide to label ourselves with. But we're set apart instead because we identify as Jesus followers. We have chosen to walk in the steps and principles of Jesus with our lives, to follow him. Peter phrases it further this way. So then, dear friends, Since you are looking forward to this, make every effort to be found spotless, blameless, and at peace with him. What he's saying is simply that if we're a Jesus follower, then we're not content to stay dirty. We investigate our habits and our attitudes and our behaviors at home and at work and in our community and in private. And all of those things are continually informed by the teaching of Jesus and by the promptings of his Spirit that lives within us. And that isn't what allows us to be a Jesus follower, to become a Jesus follower, but it is what identifies us as a Jesus follower. As we make every effort to be spotless and blameless and at peace, because following Jesus isn't a passive activity. In fact, Peter says, I want you to make every effort. Be fully engaged in following Jesus. Because as you follow Jesus, he makes your life better and he makes you better at life. And so you're continually asking the question, what does love require of me in this moment? And as I live that out, it becomes increasingly obvious that I'm set apart as a follower of Jesus, pursuing him with my attitudes and my actions. So as we brace for the next wave, not of this pandemic, but the next wave of whatever comes our way that disrupts our lives, that leaves us feeling so out of control, we first have to ask, since all this is temporary and out of my control anyway, who do I want to be really? And I would challenge you, jot this down on the napkin that's sitting beside your coffee cup this morning. Or maybe text this to yourself so that you've got a record of it. Because if we go back to this thought, in hundreds of homes throughout Georgia's Lake Country right now, and we begin to really ponder this question. Since all this is temporary and out of my control anyway, who do I want to be really? It could change everything. Everything about your home. Everything about how nervous you go through life. Everything about how clearly you follow Jesus. So I've asked Mel and the band to come back and to share a new song with us that recaptures and retells this truth. But before we get there, let me take a moment and pray for you. God, in our lives, we try to move past the disruption. This is temporary. We want to move on. We want to move to where we have control. And God, as we look at the history of humankind, we are typically out of control. So God, as we walk through this and prepare for whatever comes next, God, I pray that you would help us to be mindful of the fact that this life is temporary, that it is out of our control anyway. And God, please walk us through who you want us to be, really. Change us at home and at work, in our community, and in these moments that we're alone and no one can see or know. And God, may we reflect your love well. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Well, I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise, treasures and faith, never enough. You came along, together. And every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing is better than
mind around being out of control during this time that we're in. I think that is the most true perhaps for some of our parents, our moms and dads and grandparents who are schooling a child at home while trying to do everything else. And so this morning, as we begin to wrap up the day, I wanted to share an interview with you that I had this week with a lady who is an administrator in a school in Athens and has been for several years, as she shares some hope for us that no matter what it is that we're doing, if we're investing time with our children, that we are helping to move them forward during this disrupting time. So take a look at this Hints from Home.
Well, today I'm super excited to talk with Sharon Casola. Sharon is a wife, a mom. She's an educator, both as a teacher and as an administrator. And she's joining our family ministry team to work alongside our family ministry director and our incredible volunteers as we prepare to invite families back to the building whenever that can be. So Sharon, as an educator who's wrapping up a school year yourself, I have to ask, there are so many parents and grandparents who are schooling their kids at home and they're quite afraid that they're somehow ruining the future of their children. How would you answer that?
Well, that's a really good question, and I hear those fears when I talk to parents as well. But what we have to remember is there is no handbook for this. There's no guidebook. It's unprecedented. And so we don't really know how we're doing, and we don't really know how to navigate. But something we can remember is that it is a global pandemic. And what I've learned from that is that's impacting about 56 million children that are school age. And so we can look at that and know, well, take comfort in the fact that we're not alone. And another number that was a little bit disturbing that I heard recently was that 41 point something % of children who maybe didn't have digital access or they didn't have the technology available or even just the home support pretty much stopped learning the first week in March. So as an educator, from my perspective, we don't really know what that's going to look like in the fall. And so, but you can be rest assured that schools are going to take measures to catch everybody up to speed, and just know that we're all in this together and we're just doing the best we can and moving forward. So.
Well, it is encouraging to stop and think that this is a global thing, not just it's something right here where we are. So it's not like our kids are getting behind compared to the rest of the world. That is encouraging to stop and think about for a second. Well, I know that you have such a strong faith in Jesus. As a parent, how would you encourage a parent to think through that lens as they work with their children during this season?
Well, like it or not, we teach our children every day through our actions and our responses. And as we go through a crisis, such as the COVID-19 crisis, we can respond in fear and worry, and children pick up on that and they learn from that, and they're learning how to navigate what future crisis might come into their lives by how we respond. But also, if we act out of fear rather than trusting in God, then because we're losing control and we don't have that sense of control that we like to have on our daily schedules, that can impact your children. So I would encourage you, just move forward, trust God. There's nothing we can do about it. It's unprecedented, and just don't waste this time. Take time to get reacquainted with your children, and just engage with them, get to know them, have good conversations. I've been so encouraged seeing parents having picnics outside and just doing things as a family that normally our schedules don't allow for. And then I believe your children will learn how to trust God through the uncertain times.
Well, Sharon, thank you so much for spending time with us. We look forward to seeing you in person, and I appreciate your time today.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground this morning, and I hope that you found it encouraging and helpful. And if you're a guest, make sure to click that I'm a Guest link to help stay connected. And we wanted to take a second to say thank you to everyone who continues to support the mission of the church. If you're someone who normally does that in the room, you can do that online by clicking the I'm Making a Gift button or by visiting lakeoconeechurch.org/give. Well, that wraps up our time together this morning. We're opening our family ministry group links, and your preschool, elementary, middle, and high school students can join their group at lakeoconeechurch.org/familylive. I hope to see you back here next week. Take care.